Chapter 35. The Night of the Priest King. It occurred late last night. I had joined a group of men from Ar, some of whom remembered me from the siege of Ar more than 7 years ago. We had left the fair of Sabar, and we were making our way around the perimeter of the Sadar range before crossing the Vosk on the way to Ar. We had made camp. We were still within sight of the crags of the Sadar. It was a windy, cold night, and the 3 moons of Gor were full, and the silvery grasses of the fields were swept by the chill blasts of that passing wind. I could smell the cold tang of approaching winter. There had already been a heavy frost the night before, and it was wild, beautiful autumn night. "By the priest kings!" shouted a man, pointing to a ridge. "What is that?" I and the others leapt to our feet, swords drawn to see where he had pointed. And about 200 yards above the camp, toward the Sadar, whose crags could be seen looming in the background against the black, star-shattered night, was a strange figure, outlined against one of the white rushing moons of Gor. There were gasps of astonishment and horror from all save myself. Men seized weapons. "Let us rush it! Kill it!" they cried. I sheathed my sword. Outlined against the largest of Gor's 3 hurtling moons, the black silhouette, as sharp as a knife, of a priest king. "Wait here," I shouted. I ran across the field and climbed the knoll on which it stood. The 2 peering eyes, golden and luminous, looked down at me, the antenna whipped by the wind. They then focused themselves. Across the left eye disc I could see the whitish seam that was the scar left from the slashing blade-like projection of Psalm. "Misk!" I cried, rushing to the priest king and lifting my hands to receive his antenna, which was gently placed within them. "Greetings, Tarkabat," came from Misk's translator. "You have saved our world," I said. "It is empty for priest kings." I stood below him, looking up, the wind lifting and tugging at my hair. "I came to see you one last time," he said, "for there is mistrust between us." "Yes," I said. "You are my friend," he said, and my heart leapt. "Yes," he said, "the expression is now ours as well as yours, and you and those like you have taught us its meaning." "I am glad," I said. That night Misk told me of how affairs stood in the nest. It would be long before the powers of the broken nest could be restored, before the scanning chamber could function again, before the vast damages done to the nest could even be repaired. But men and priest kings were even now at work, side by side. The ships that had sped from the Sadar had now returned, for as I had feared, they were not made welcome by the cities of Gor, nor by the initiates, and those who had ridden the ships had not been accepted by their cities. Indeed, the ships were regarded as vehicles of a type forbidden to men by priest kings, and their passengers were attacked in the name of the priest kings from which they had come. In the end, those humans who wished to remain upon the surface had landed elsewhere, far from their native cities. They scattered themselves as vagabonds about the roads and the alien cities of the planet. Others finally returned to the nest to share in the work of its rebuilding. The body of Sarm, I learned, had been burned in the chamber of the mother, according to the custom of the priest kings, for he had been firstborn and beloved of the mother. Misk apparently bore him not the least ill will. I was amazed at this until it occurred to me that I did not either. He had been a great enemy, a great priest king, and had lived as he had thought he should. I would always remember Sarm, huge and golden, and the last agonizing minute when he pulled free of the golden beetle, had stood upright and splendid in the crumbling, pushing nest that he was determined must be destroyed. He was the greatest of the priest kings, said Misk. No, I said. Sarm is not the greatest of the priest kings. Misk looked at me quizzically. The mother, he said, was not a priest king. She is simply the mother. Oh, I know, I said. I do not mean the mother. Yes, Kusk is perhaps the greatest of the living priest kings. I do not mean Kusk either, I said. Misk looked at me in puzzlement. I shall never understand humans, he said, and to that I laughed. I truly believed it never occurred to Misk that I meant that he himself, Misk, was the greatest of the Tree Kings. But I truly believed he was. He was one of the greatest creatures I had known. He was brilliant, courageous, loyal, selfless, dedicated. What of the young male? I asked. Was he destroyed? No, said Misk. He is safe. For some reason this pleased me. Perhaps I simply was pleased that there had not been further destruction and further loss of life. Have you had the humans slay the golden beetles? I asked. Misk straightened. Of course not, he said. They will kill the other priest kings. Who am I, said Misk, to decide how a priest king should live or die? I was silent. I regret only, said Misk, that I never learned the location of the last egg. The secret died with Mother. Now the race of priest kings itself must die. I looked up at him. The mother spoke to me. She was going to tell me the location of the egg, but could not. Suddenly Misk was frozen in the attitude of utter attention. The antenna lifted, each sensory hair alive upon his golden body. What did you learn? Came from Misk's translator. She only said, and I told him, to go to the wagon peoples. Misk's antenna moved thoughtfully. Then, he said, it must be with the wagon peoples, or they must know where it is. By now, I said, any life in the egg would surely have perished. Misk looked at me with disbelief. It is an egg of priest kings. Then his antenna fell disconcertedly. But it could have been destroyed. By this time, I said, it probably has been. Undoubtedly, said Misk. Still, you are not sure. No, said Misk, I am not. You could send implanted ones to spy, I suggested. There are no more implanted ones, said Misk. We have recalled them and are removing the control nets. They may return to their cities or remain in the nest as they pleased. You are voluntarily giving up a valuable surveillance device, I said. Yes, said Misk. But why? It is wrong to implant rational creatures, said Misk. Yes, I said, I think that is true. The scanning chamber, said Misk, will not be operational for an indefinite period. And even so, can scan only objects in the open. Perhaps you could develop a depth scanner, I suggested, one that could penetrate walls, grounds, and ceilings. We are working on it, said Misk, and I laughed. Misk's antenna curled. If you should regain your power, I asked, what do you propose to do with it? Will you set forth the law on certain matters for men? Undoubtedly, said Misk. I was silent. We must protect ourselves and those humans who live with us, spoke Misk. I looked down the hill to where the campfire gleamed in the darkness. I could see the human figures huddled about it, looking up at the hill. What of the egg? Asked Misk. What of it? I asked. I cannot go myself. I am needed in the nest, and even so, my antennae cannot stand the sun, not for more than hours at most. If I so much as approach a human, it would probably fear me and try to slay me. You will have to find a human, I said to him. Miss looked down at me. What of you, Tarl Cabot? He asked, and I looked up at him. The affairs of priest-kings, I said, are not mine. Misk looked about himself. He lifted his antenna toward the moons, the wind-swept grass. He looked down at the distant campfire. He shivered a bit in that cold wind. The moons are beautiful. Misk looked up. I did too. Yes, I think so. Once you spoke to me, I said, of random elements. I looked up to the moons. Is that, seeing that the moons are beautiful, is that a random elemented man? I think, said Misk, it is part of man. You spoke once of machines, I said. Howsoever I spoke, said Misk. Words cannot diminish men or priest-kings, for who cares what we are, if we can act, decide, sense beauty, seek right, and have hopes for our people. I swallowed hard, for I knew I had hopes for my race, and I sensed how Misk must have them for his. Only his race was dying, and would sooner or later, one by one, meet with accident, or succumb to the pleasures of the golden beetle. And my race, well, it would live upon Gor, at least for the time, because of what Misk and Priest Kings had done to preserve their world for them. Your affairs, I told them, but speaking to myself, are your affairs. They are not mine. Of course, agreed Misk. If I should attempt to help Misk, what would this mean ultimately? Would it not be to surrender my race to the mercies of the people of Sarm and the priest kings who had served him? Or would it be ultimately to protect my race until it had learned to live with itself, until it had reached the maturity of humanity, until it, together with the people who called themselves priest kings, would address itself to a common world, to the galaxy beyond? Your world is dying, I said to Misk. The universe itself will die, spoke Misk. He had his antenna lifted to the whole white fires that burned in the black night over Gor. I surmised he was speaking of those entropic regularities that apparently prevail in reality as we know it. The loss of energy, its transformation to the ashes of the stellar night. It will grow cold and dark, said Misk, and I looked up at him. But in the end, said he, life is as real as death. There will be return of the ultimate rhythms, and a new explosion will cast forth the primitive particles, and we shall have another turning of the wheel. Some day, sometime in eons, which defy the calculations even of priest kings. There may be another nest, another earth, another Gor, will another Misk, and another tall cabot stand upon a windy hill in the moonlight and speak of strange things. Misk's antenna looked down upon me. Perhaps, he said, we have stood here on this hill, the three together, unbeknown to either of us, already an infinite number of times. The wind seemed now very cold and very swift. And what did we do? I asked. I do not know what we did, said Miss, but I think I would now choose to do that action which I would be willing that I should do again and again. With each turning of that wheel, I would choose so to live that I might be willing that I should live that life 1,000 times, even forever. I would choose to live that I might stand boldly with my deed without regards throughout eternity. The thoughts that he had spoken seemed to scare me, horrify me. But Misk stood, the wind whipping at his antenna, as though he were exalted. He then looked down at me, his antenna curled. But I speak very foolishly. Forgive me, Darl Cabot. It is hard sometimes to understand you, I said. I could see climbing the hill towards us a warrior. He grasped a spear. Are you all right? He called. Yes, I called back to him. Stand back, he cried, so I can have a clean cast. Do not injure it, I cried to him. It is harmless. Misk's antenna curled. I wish you well, Darl Cabot. The affairs of priest kings, I said to him, more intensely than ever, are not my affairs. I looked up at him. Not mine, I cried. I know. And Misk gently extended his antenna down towards me, and I touched them. I wish you well. I wish you well, priest king. Abruptly I turned from Misk and rushed down the hill, almost blindly. I stopped only when I reached the side of the warrior, and he was joined by 2 or 3 more of the men from the camp below, who were also armed. We were also joined by an initiate of unimportant ranking. Together we watched the tall figure on the hill, outlined against the moon and not moving, standing in the uncanny, marvelous immobility of the priest king, only its antenna blowing back down over its head in the wind. What is it? Asked one of the men. It looks like a giant insect, said the initiate. I smiled to myself. Yes, I said, it does look like a giant insect. May the priest kings protect us, breathed the initiate. One of the men drew back his spear arm, but I stayed it. No, do not injure it. What is it? Asked another of the men. How could I tell him that he looked with incredulity and horror on one of the awesome denizens of the grim Sadar, on one of the fabulous and mysterious monarchs of this very world, on one of the gods of Gor, on a priest king? I can hurl my spear through it, said the man with the spear. It is harmless, I said. Let's kill it anyway, said the initiate nervously. No, I said. I lifted my arm in farewell to Misk, and to the surprise of the men with me, Misk lifted a foreleg, then turned and was gone. For a long time I and the others stood in the windy night, almost knee-deep in the flowing, bending grass. and watching the knoll and the stars behind it and the great moon above. It's gone, said one of the men, alas. Yes, I said. Thank the priest-kings, breathed the initiate. I laughed, and the man looked at me as though I might be mad. I spoke to the man with the spear, for he was also the leader of that small group. Where, I asked him, is the land of the wagon peoples?